Howdy guys. 2022 was a weird year, but great year for movies. Even with all the streaming battles and studios trying to figure out what movies they should and shouldn't put out in theaters, we got some great films. We had indie hits, action blockbusters, horror gems, and some lovely animation. Just a little bit of everything. I saw 65 films from this year as of recording, but there's still a handful I haven't seen yet, so if you're curious, I'll be updating that on my Letterboxd as I watch those movies. There are so many movies I want to give some love to, but there's only so much time. So before I get into the list, here's a bunch of honorable mentions. Glass Onion, The Banshees of Inisherin, Tar, The Menu, Babylon, Jackass Forever, See How They Run, Barbarian, Pinocchio, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and Broker. Whew. Okay, on to the list.
She smoked 100s when I met her. She tried to quit before she left me. I'm not so sure if that's important. Free association gets me dizzy. They ask what's the reason for your appointment. I try to come up with something vague. She asks if I'm going to the party. I tell her I'm going to the party.
Let's watch a sitcom or something.
No! It's so hot by noon, I just get queasy. It's so hot by 2, I stay inside. I try to put down a cup of coffee. He asks how much I'm drinking and I lie. But doctors are always trying to tell you some torturous way to live your life. It's not like they know everything ever. Hey man, I went to college too.
This was the very last film I watched before making this video, and I'm so glad I did, because it is an absolute gem. Hit the Road is an Iranian film by first-time director Panah Panahi, son of acclaimed director Jafar Panahi. It follows an eclectic family of 4 on a mysterious road trip. While it's unclear where they are going, the family has humorous banter back and forth over nonsensical topics, but it slowly becomes clear that the older son must escape the country. For a first-time director, Panahi has such a firm command over the medium, using mostly long takes with fixed cameras to immerse ourselves in the world with these characters. But he's surprisingly creative as well, with imaginative stylistic choices, musical sequences, and a strong use of landscapes surrounding the car our characters spend most of the film in. The 4 performances at the center of the film are incredible. I really like the dynamic between both parents, but my personal favorite performance was Ryan Sarlacc as the 6-year-old little brother, a hilariously crazy loudmouth who terrorizes his family. Your mileage on child performances might vary, but I found him so funny and charming. In many ways, he's the most essential piece of this film to give it the necessary levity it needs. This is a beautifully tragic comedy that teeters the line between heartache and humor gracefully. A film that leads on deadpan comedy because it knows we need it as much as the family at the center of the film do in order to make it through. A wonderful film. I loved this movie. Such an improvement over the original. Truth be told, I was not the biggest Avatar fan. I remember enjoying it as a kid, but I hadn't seen it since it came out. I actually decided to give the first film a rewatch before the new one came out, and, you know, it's alright. definitely not amazing, and the script honestly isn't great, but Cameron knows how to make something charming and genuinely fun. But it seems clear to me now that Cameron needed that first film as a stepping stone to really explore all the ideas he wanted to. So many times throughout the movie I kept thinking, how the hell did he do that? Cameron is a madman. Visually it's spectacular, but the script is thankfully better as well. While it still has that cheesy Cameron dialogue, it's a vast improvement overall. I thought the new characters were great, but the real standout to me was Sigourney Weaver playing her own 14-year-old daughter. Crazy decision, but it pays off tenfold. There's a gentleness to her character that I think helps set the tone for the rest of the film. Spider and some of Jake's other kids were perhaps a bit underwritten, but I don't think it detracts too heavily from the overall film. It's really great to watch a big action blockbuster that is genuine and takes itself seriously. We spend like 40 minutes just hanging out with a space whale, and it's great. I love Pyacon. I saw it twice in theaters and I had a blast both times. I even got the big funny AMC cup. What's crazy is that it still feels like there's so much more left to explore on Pandora. I'm really excited to see where this story goes. Never bet against Cameron. When I saw the film for the first time, I honestly didn't love it. I respected the ambition, but I expected a much different movie than what we got. But Peele is such an interesting filmmaker, and I couldn't get Nope out of my head. So I decided to give it a rewatch and found myself really falling for it. Everything seemed to click. Peele is so good at layering his films and rewarding repeat viewings. I didn't fully appreciate how thoroughly he explores the themes of spectacle and interrogates the history of filmmaking itself. His attention to detail, not only with the camera but with his writing, is such a joy to watch unfold. How do you even think up a story like this, connecting Aliens, a fake 90s sitcom about a monkey, and the first film of a black man on a horse all together into one cohesive film? It's insane. The performances are all great, but the two standouts were Keke Palmer and Steven Yeun for me. I think they both own every second they're on screen, and Yeun does so much with such little time he has. The Gordy sequence might be my favorite scene of the year. I still don't love everything about the film. I know this is maybe a petty complaint, but I don't like the font of the title cards. It feels a little lazy, especially when it feels like so much detail went into every other aspect of the production. I also feel like Peele is just bursting with ideas that by the end of the film he isn't able to tie them all together perfectly. But it doesn't matter all too much when the rest of the film is so fun and interesting. I cannot wait to see what Peele does next. It still feels like he's just scratching the surface. 2022's Palme d'Or winner has been divisive to say the least, but I had so much fun with it. I was a little nervous going in because while I really enjoy Ruben Östlund's film Force Majeure, I really didn't like his most recent effort, The Square, which also won the Palme in 2017. But thankfully, Triangle is much better, a razor-sharp political satire that goes perfectly with Östlund's visual style. I love how many different topics he's able to tackle and how we move from character to character. He's able to constantly keep us on our toes and genuinely say something about modern society while not taking the whole thing too seriously. And the Act 2 set piece is masterful. All the barfing and shitting had me and the whole theater rolling. Woody Harrelson playing the communist captain of the luxury yacht was definitely my favorite part of the film. His scene with the Russian capitalist was hilarious. I do agree that the third act isn't as strong as the first two, but I still really enjoyed it, and thought Dolly De Leon did an excellent job there. An absolute riot. What a cool film. Luca has been on an absolute tear lately. Only he can take such a grotesque subject matter and give it the space and compassion it needs to blossom. This ghoulish cannibal love story was surprisingly sweet, and I thought the way it used cannibalism as a way to talk about addiction was done rather well. Taylor Russell was great, but I also thought Mark Rylance was terrific and really terrifying. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten any awards attention. The film was stunningly shot too, and had a really lovely score. I kept thinking about the score while watching, and saw in the credits it was Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Of course it was. Let Luca make whatever he wants. After years of making movies about divorce and daddy issues, Spielberg was finally able to make a film about his own parents' actual divorce that played a huge role in him becoming the most iconic filmmaker of all time. This movie could have easily been a self-congratulatory love letter to cinema, but thankfully Spielberg is not interested in that. Instead, we get a touching, personal, and heartfelt look at his family life and the difficulty that becoming a filmmaker put on him and his family. Years ago, I watched the very good HBO doc about Spielberg's life and filmography, so I had a rough idea of what this story might be, but I was shocked about how much deeper it really went. I love how we see film as not just a passion, but a physical and emotional need for Sammy, and in that same breath, how that passion tore his family apart. To him, cinema is magical and detrimental. Spielberg is both acutely aware of his place in the pantheon of cinema and self-critical. The cast was fantastic. Michelle Williams, Paul Dano, and Judd Hirsch were all excellent. Spielberg pulls no punches when diving into the intricacies of his personal life. I think Williams' performance as Spielberg's eccentric mother will be the one people remember, but I thought Gabriel LaBelle was especially great, and really captured the youth, naivete, and passion that character needs. As someone who wants to make films someday, I was just incredibly inspired by this film, and I adored it. It's grown on me more and more over time, and it has maybe my favorite ending of the year. This was arguably my most anticipated movie of 2022. After Eggers' hypnotic sophomore film, The Lighthouse, I was down for whatever this guy was going to throw at me. His love of history and lore has led to some of the most immersive and exciting films of the last decade, and while I don't think The Northman was as good as The Lighthouse, this movie is fantastic. Much has been made about Eggers' dedication to making films period accurate, going out of his way to make every little detail perfect, and that's one of my favorite things about him, because you can really feel that here. Even with his biggest budget to date, Eggers is thankfully uncompromising in his vision, and gives us what I believe is one of the most authentic Viking stories ever put to screen. A $90 million historical epic would typically force most directors to lean on conventional narrative choices, but Eggers is much more exacting, bringing to life some of the most jaw-dropping set pieces of the year. Some of the long takes in this film are genuinely unbelievable. This is a bloody, gruesome, and unforgiving film that acknowledges that Vikings are both badass and deeply troubling figures. One thing I love about the way Eggers looks at history and writes his films is that he understands that fantasy and magic are deeply connected with these cultures. So while it's technically not accurate to have Valkyries and ghosts, it makes sense in the context of the film. Alexander Skarsgård is fully committed here as Amleth, this insane, bloodthirsty prince hell-bent on revenge. I think if he's not convincing, the whole film falls apart, and thankfully he gives it his all, turning into this primal, unwielding beast of a man. Everyone else is giving it their all as well. Ethan Hawke, Anya Taylor-Joy, William Dafoe, Bjork, but Nicole Kidman was another standout to me, with a deliciously wicked monologue late in the film. This is a freaky, hellish world these characters inhabit, and I felt they played it all perfectly. I think where the film falters for me a bit is in the second half, where it slows down and becomes a bit unfocused. I also think the film greatly underutilizes Anya Taylor-Joy, who is one of the more interesting characters. In terms of Eggers' own filmography, this is a very straightforward movie, where I feel his other films give us a bit more to chew on. Nonetheless, I still had an absolute blast with this film. It's a remarkable achievement. Was any movie more fun this year? The slow build this film had online and the joy it brought so many people was such a wonderful sight to see. While there were plenty of good action movies this year, I don't think any came close to the pure love and insanity of RRR, a 3-hour, fictional historical epic about two best friends on opposing sides of a war. This film is ridiculous in the best ways possible. One of our main characters is introduced by fighting an entire army by himself, and the other is introduced by fighting a tiger, and it only gets crazier from there. Please take notes, Hollywood. I think the thing that makes this movie stand out among the rest is its sincerity. It's not winking at the camera, it's owning 100% of the ridiculousness on screen, and doubling down at every turn. In the middle of the movie, it essentially stops and gives us a half-hour rom-com, and it works. Plus, we get Naatu Naatu, the musical number of the year. I can't even explain the joy I get every single time I see that scene. It's pure cinema. I try not to make too much fuss about the Oscars, but the fact that RRR was not nominated for Best Picture is such a bummer because this film is just unbelievable. But at least Naatu was nominated for Best Song. I honestly don't want to say too much about the film, just go in blind and enjoy the absolutely ridiculous ride. I've become pretty numb to the superhero genre over the last few years. The generic goop that seems to make its way into theaters every year has had increasingly diminished returns for me. I could honestly care less about most of them, if we're being honest. But if we're gonna keep getting these movies, I'd at least like them to be good. So it's been awfully refreshing when one has genuine craft and talent behind it. Last year we got The Suicide Squad, and this year we got The Batman. I've been a fan of Matt Reeves for years now. Cloverfield is arguably my favorite found footage movie, and I loved his Ape sequels. So when he was announced as the director of the new Batman movies, I knew we were in good hands. While it might not be the very best Batman movie, I firmly believe this to be the most interesting and compelling Batman character we've seen on the silver screen. His choice to focus on Batman as a detective and essentially make a neo-noir movie was perfect. I'm a sucker for neo-noir movies in general, so he kinda had me from the start. I think the tone is essential for pulling off this movie, and he does it with ease. And of course, we have to talk about Pattinson, who is outstanding in this role. I was curious to the angle they take with Pattinson because he's not the traditional choice for this character. He's a pretty weird dude, so I loved that they made this Bruce Wayne a huge weirdo. He's a strange, moody freak who dresses up like a bat, and it's great. Like, this movie is surprisingly funny. Seeing a large man in a bat costume look for clues is weird and stupid and funny, and I think Reeves understands that and uses it to his advantage. I also think what sets this film apart is that it feels very much lifted from a graphic novel. With the inclusion of the voiceover and the epic scale of the story, it felt like it was a comic come to life. The rest of the cast is great. Paul Dano, Colin Farrell, everyone else adds so much personality to the film. If I had any critiques, I think it would be that the film would have been helped with an R rating, and I don't mean that it necessarily needed more violence or cursing, but with the subplot about drugs, seeing eye drops was just a little funny. Like, I didn't really buy into it. I think they do a great job at making Gotham feel disgusting, but to really capture the essence of a city falling apart, I think we needed just a little bit more to really buy into that. And while I love a fun, complicated neo-noir mystery, I do think the mystery at the center of this film should have been reworked a little. I kinda saw all the twists coming, and they didn't feel as compelling as they should have. Regardless of those complaints, this is a well-crafted and gorgeous film from a director that has a clear vision for what he wants. I can't wait for the next one. What else was it gonna be? Everything Everywhere feels like the definitive film of 2022 that captured the essence of the movie-going experience. I saw it opening night expecting something weird, and what I got was so much more. It's not only silly and outlandish, but expertly crafted with so much detail and precision. For a film with a million ideas floating around at once, it balances all of its moving pieces brilliantly. The Daniels direct this film wonderfully with such a firm command over the frankly overwhelming material. They understand that at the heart of this roller coaster of a film, there needs to be an emotional core, and with Michelle Yeoh, Ke Huy Quan, and Stephanie Hsu at the beating heart of this thing, it works like a charm. They are just all so wonderful in their respected roles and give these characters so much depth and humanity. I expected to enjoy the beautifully choreographed action, the hilarious set pieces, but what I didn't expect was to get choked up in the end of this movie. In a world that seems to be moving faster than we can keep up with, the Daniels captured something that speaks to the time we are currently living in, to a generation of people seemingly forced to consume images and ideas quicker than any other generation before them, and to constantly be forced to look at our own mortality and the endless amount of choices we have to make. They made a film that shows us that what's really important is to keep our family and the people we love close. They are what truly matter. And those are my favorite films of 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you haven't seen all of them, I hope you go check them out. But before I go, I thought I'd talk about some of my other favorite things of 2022. I've kind of slacked on TV in recent years, but I think this year I watched a good handful of shows. Some of my favorites were The Bear, House of the Dragon, Severance, Love is War, Only Murders in the Building, Chainsaw Man, Spy Family, Peacemaker, and Andor. But my two definitive favorites had to be The Boys Season 3 and Atlanta Seasons 3 and 4. The Boys has slowly become one of my favorite shows on television. I love how it's able to take such smart, funny, and insightful commentary on not only superhero culture, but the media landscape and our current political climate. That, along with a cast of incredibly well-written characters, makes for one of today's best shows. Homelander has to be the best character in television right now. He owns every second he's on screen. Anthony Starr was seemingly born for this role. Atlanta ending was bittersweet for me, as it's been one of my favorite shows for the last number of years. With most shows seemingly following the same formula as one another, Atlanta was always so refreshing, a show that refused to conform to modern television, instead carving its own path to create something much more meaningful. I loved the back and forth of Season 3, of their bizarre European adventures, to these standalone episodes dealing with unique issues in the Black community in America. Three Slaps, The Old Man in the Tree, Cancer Attack, and New Jazz especially stood out to me. Season 4 was also hilarious and strange, with brilliant episodes like Crank That Killer, but was much more emotional than previous seasons. To me, Atlanta was a show that pushed away from norms. I mean, it barely had a narrative, but it was refreshing to see Earn and the crew get more introspective and emotional. Episodes like Snipe Hunt really took me by surprise. And not enough can be said about how insanely good every episode looks. I work in television, and it was so refreshing to watch a show that had meaningful and thoughtful directing, and wasn't just coverage. The show really had everything. I mean, like, what a cast. Everyone in it is so good. I'm really gonna miss Atlanta, one of my favorite shows that ends in such a weird and hilariously fitting way. There wasn't a whole lot of new manga I read in 2022, but Chainsaw Man returning for part 2 has been great. Mainly following the new character, Asa, has been fun. She is so weird and freaky and such a good foil to Denji. I can't wait to see where Fujimoto takes the story from here. Speaking of Fujimoto, last year we got a one-shot manga from the author called Goodbye Eri that was fantastic. It was beautiful and funny and shocking in all the right ways. Fujimoto has never shied away from the fact that Western cinema has been a huge influence on his work. And here it's never been more clear, as every panel represents a frame of our main character's camera. Its unique visual style helps give it an emotional touch I wasn't expecting. Loved it. Another manga that returned in 2022 was Hunter x Hunter after God knows how long. The manga is definitely a beast to read and not for everyone due to its dense and overcomplicated nature, but I just love this world so much that new chapters are such a joy. It's currently back on hiatus, but here's hoping we get more soon. There were a ton of great releases in 2022, and a bunch of albums I really enjoyed, but hands down my favorite album of the year was Blue Rev by Always. I've been a huge fan of theirs for years, and with their third album, Always created a hypnotic, textured, and sonically rich album that mixes indie rock with shoegaze and synthesizers galore. It immediately pulls you in with the commanding first track, Pharmacist, this noisy, distorted, but equally catchy song about running into an old ex, or your ex's sister. From there, it never lets go. Molly Rankin's songwriting has never been stronger and more emotionally precise. Lyrics like I shouldn't have ever been calling it love on Tile by Tile hit especially hard as the song comes to a head. The whole album is a joy to listen to from top to bottom. I've gone through it countless times already. They were my #1 artist on Spotify, and Pharmacist was my #1 song. I even got to see them live, and it was incredible. A few of my other favorite tracks include Many Mirrors, Tile by Tile, and After the Earthquake. If you haven't listened to it yet, I implore you to. Some of my other favorite albums were Here Comes Everybody by Spacey Jane, Running with the Hurricane by Camp Cope, Imagining Someplace Quiet by Disc, 1111 by Pine Grove, Expert in a Dying Field by The Beths, Cheat Codes by Black Thought and Danger Mouse, Magic Hour by Surf Curse, Sore Thumb by Oso Oso, and God Save the Animals by Alex G. My favorite EP was My Own Two Hands by Theravada, and as a little bonus, one of my favorite albums, not from this year, but released this year, was I Was an Astronaut from Margot and the Nuclear So-and-Sos. One of my favorite bands ever, frontman Richard Edwards released the unofficial first Margot album this year. There's a number of great tracks like Kim, Jolene We Almost Never Met, Butterball, and As Bombs Fall. And here's a list of some of my other favorite songs from 2022. I don't really talk about video games on this channel, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to Elden Ring, which was maybe just the best thing that came out last year. It was everything I ever wanted out of an RPG, an immersive, endlessly playable game with a gorgeous world and incredibly rewarding combat. I feel like there's other channels that have articulated what makes Elden Ring so special, so I won't linger on it too long, but it's been years since I've had this much fun with a game. And that's it for 2022. Thanks for watching. Just the small support I've gotten has been really great, and I'm hoping to make even more videos this year. If you had a favorite movie, album, show, or whatever, let me know in the comments down below, or let me know something you'd like me to cover. Thanks, guys.